kind of tracking and following their activities for the last 15 years. And if you notice that almost every logging sale that goes up for bid in the BLM or the U.S. Forest Service in this area, if there's any litigation that comes out against them, where's it coming from? KS Wild. KS Wild, we have over on the wall over here, I've got Trenner Scott, one of my Southern Oregon Resource Alliance members, and he'll show you this. He's got just one foundation that they receive money from, and where the monies are going from these foundations to all these environmental groups that are taking away and deindustrializing America, in my opinion. I wanted to say, after Sandy said poverty with a view, welcome to the reservation. Because that's what's happening to us. We're having 300,000 acres of land in southwestern Oregon and 300,000 acres of land in Northern California proposed as a monument where it already has the Soda Mountain, the Red Buttes, the Cascade Wild, the Oregon Caves National Monument, and clear to the north, we've got the Kalmiopsis Wilderness area that's already 385,000 acres. I was looking at some research that we had done involving land ownership in the United States, the western United States. Does anyone know how much land in the state of Oregon is already owned by the federal government? So I'm going to read you some numbers because I think that you guys should know this so that you can pass it on to your friends. That we're ranked number 4 in the United States as far as federal ownership. We own 53.1% of all the land in the state of Oregon now. Then, if you go and you look at what's in the holdings of this proposed monument, which, and I respect Joseph Vale, had a nice conversation with him, and he says, Jim, you know, this is just an idea. I said, well, how come you've got about a 300-page document that you got up on the internet site of your proposed first climate refuge in the United States of America from KS Wild proposing this? How come you've had fundraisers around this subject and getting people out there, troops marching to make sure that we get this more national monument in Northern California and southwestern Oregon? The number 1 state that has federal land ownership is Nevada. 84.5% of Nevada is now federally owned. Alaska has 69.1%. Utah has 57.4%. Oregon has 53.1%. And Idaho has 50.2%. When is enough enough? How many of you out there were formerly or currently in the wood products industry? Can you raise your hand? How many jobs do you think have been lost in southwestern Oregon in the last 10 years because of legislation, regulation, and litigation by these environmental groups that are surrounding us? I don't care if you're talking about Headwaters, Siskiyou Project, KS Wild. These people are all funded by these East Coast and Washington. Believe it or not, state of Washington has a lot of foundations that fund these organizations. You know, if we protest against the people, the foundations that are funding these groups, maybe they'd go away. Maybe they'd have to come to the table like us, because I'm not getting a dime for talking to you today. I'm doing this all on a passion that I love this country. I've got a degree in fisheries and wildlife biology from Oregon State University. I've been 32 years in the real estate business in southwestern Oregon. I own an 11-unit motel with my parents in Cape Junction, Oregon, and I'm feeling the pressure of all of this deindustrialization of America. about where this is going in our country today. You know, the people that live in the urban areas that control most of our destiny down in this area, they don't think that those of us that live in rural communities should have septic tanks. They think that that's polluting the ground. You know, that's ruining Mother Nature. They don't think that we should be allowed to have over 5 gallons a minute coming out of the wells. These are specialized groups that are fighting this legislatively that's going to come to our state legislature this year with those type of proposals and bills. Everybody goes, oh, a bill like that is so ridiculous, it'll never pass through committee and pass legislation. But we never thought that we'd have to be testing not only for bacteria and nitrate as realtors, but now we have to test for arsenic. Now, how many of you in this room here have had a problem? I don't see you glowing, but how many have had problems with arsenic in this room? But it's a state mandated requirement for all realtors to do that. And it's a regulation and litigation that is killing us in this country today. I was asked to talk about what happens to economies in communities where monuments are at. And this isn't Jim Frick just talking off the top of his hat. This is actually documentation from the areas and the communities which have been affected by these monuments. And let me just tell you about the employment trends on the Colorado Plateau. Quote from Walter E. Hecox and Bradley Haig. They were charting the plateau, and they wrote a book, An Economic and Demographic Exploration on the Grand Canyon Trust, Flagstaff, Arizona. And down here they put, chronic unemployment and poverty continue to be a fact of life on the Colorado Plateau. The average annual wage for employees on the plateau remains fairly low because most are new retail and service jobs and are low paying. I think that's what we need in this area is more service jobs, more retail jobs, more low paying ones, and then you won't have very many people that can afford any houses to move. I looked at another report that had been done, and it had to do with housing. Housing growth in and near United States protected areas limits their conservation value. So these environmental groups, what they have been able to do by doing this is they are downsizing your rural communities, a lot of rural communities becoming ghost towns. I mean, we almost lost Swanson Superior up in Glendale, if you remember recently. Fortunately, they were able to get a China contract and enough land privately that they could take timber off of. But they couldn't take any of that timber, if you remember, off the Biscuit Fire. There was 1 billion board feet that rotted out there. 1 billion board feet that could have been used in manufacturing rotted out there. Because of what? Legislation, regulation, and litigation. And who were the key sponsors behind the litigation? Always try to get some great attorneys working for their organization. Thank you, KSY. And then I want to tell you, on this housing statistics, they say that they did a study, and this study was done at, believe it or not, Department of Sociology at Oregon State University did this study. And they said that from 1940 to 2030, that they quantified growth for each community within 50 kilometers of a wilderness area or national park or national forest. And they found that what's happening is a 13 to 17% decline in housing growth in those communities because of their proximity to those monuments. Now somebody asked me, and again this is hypothetical, what's it going to do to your real estate value if you're one of the, in the proposed, and again, you know, crayon's a dangerous tool in the hands of the wrong people, you know, but if you look at the crayon mapping that has been done around the proposed monument, there's 1,400 residences that we've been able to determine inside that. In Northern California, one timber company, fruit growers, has 53,000 acres of their in-holding land there that is very valuable timber. What do you think the reason is behind decommissioning all of this and converting it into monument? You know, is it really to protect a species? I got to tell you one other thing that's really interesting. If you go to the document that was a quote, just an idea, but it somehow landed in Salazar's department, and there was an internal document that leaked out through the BLM about the proposed 13 million acres, 17 different monuments west of the Mississippi River, part of which was the Siskiyou Crest. But of those 1,400 homes, do you think that there's not going to be a change of the way that they access those properties, be able to have the roadways to those properties, what they can grow on those properties? And then in that document, the most fascinating language I ever saw was that this land back here behind us, the Siskiyou Crest, which we all love so much, it used to have gray wolves and grizzly bears in there. And this would be an ideal opportunity to reintroduce those species in our backyard. The top 10 tourist attractions in the state of Oregon. Believe it or not, number 1 is the Oregon Museum of Science and History, or Industry, I'm sorry, OMSI. Secondly to that is the Portland Saturday Market. Thirdly is the Portland Art Museum. Then the Portland Rose Garden. The Oregon Zoo in Portland. And then the first one that comes even close to rural destinations like ours is Mount Bachelor. You know, skiing. Mount Bachelor Hood and Timberline. And then next behind that was the Oregon Coast Museum. Now, granted, we have some very unique species of plants and wildlife and biodiversity in this supposed bridge that they're trying to create, which eventually, by the way, the Interstate 5 corridor, it's a barrier for wildlife habitation to cross that barrier. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, if we're going to have an earthen bridge that eventually goes over that for several $1 million or what. But anyway, if you look at their agenda is, hey, we got to keep funded, so we got to convince these people on the East Coast, you know, that we're killing all the wildlife, we've stripped all the forests, and we've mined everything like the real hillside up there. And so I looked at what are the smallest population centers where the U.S. government puts any land. Where do you think those are? Top 5. Connecticut has 0.4% of their land is federally owned. Rhode Island is 0.4% federally owned. Iowa, 0.8% federally owned. New York, what a surprise, 0.8% federally owned. And Maine, 1.1% federally owned. Don't you guys want to stand up and fight and say enough is enough? They've locked up enough public land. I thank you for your time. I'm the chairman of Southern Oregon Resource Alliance. We have a website at soranews.org. Thank you.